Yes.
This. Yeah, good. Welcome, guys, to Zero Chills TV. Welcome to our third session today. We're about to go live with HR expert, business partner mwenyewe. By this, jatoka kwa kitanda. Sai, I'm fresh. I'm actually very fresh. Been waiting to have this guy for a long time. So I'll introduce Oliver, and the person who is hosting the meeting today is Nisi Owino. Oliver is a HR business partner at L'Oreal East Africa. He also likes fish. He's also an artist. He paints really well, like really, really, really well. He's a young guy, very sharp, very bombastic with tough words. So wacha nisimsifu zaidi hapo ndio asikuwe kichwa ngumu. Nisi will be the host for the first session of the meeting. So, Nisi, take it away.
First of all, I won't say I've been ambushed. I'll pretend I've been getting ready for this for the longest time of my life. So it just sure no love lost. But anyway, Oliver is he's a personal friend. He's also, I work with him. The thing about Oliver is being, from my point of view, being just a HR, but he's also more of like a team builder, a person who cares about people, how people thrive, how his teams thrive. So today, basically, is just to understand from Oliver's point of view, what does it look like to be in that position, and how does he know he's making the right decisions and they're hiring their employees? So a few questions we'll ask Oliver, then we'll take in your questions as you come through. If you're joining from Facebook, send us a shout out, send like an emoji. If you're joining from YouTube, maybe a sticker or something, just let us know where you're watching from. So yes, Oliver, maybe 5 minutes, introduce yourself, tell us whatever you want us to know about you. Yes, introduce yourself to the people.
Sounds good. So my name is Asaid Oliver Tambo. Of course, I'm very much Kenyan. My name was borrowed from South Africa because my dad was extremely passionate about the Pan-African movement. So currently, I am a HR person with L'Oreal East Africa, one of the best companies that anyone would wish to work with. And it's quite a good experience. So the role is actually very huge. Being a HR person, you're like a small god, because there are some points where you hold, short-term destiny. So we are like short-term destiny holders. But I think on a deeper level, this is a profession that I'm really passionate about. I think it is something that can contribute much larger towards, the building of nations, building of the future leaders, and generally building of careers. So that's why I chose it. And yeah, that's how I'd like to be known. Outside work, I think I sort of completed it. Of course, I love fish, being that, this is something that was cultivated in my DNA as early as I was young. And I'm a painter. I love poems. So if you check my Facebook page, you will see me, of course, struggling to do some poems. It's more about the message than it is about the rendition. Yeah, so that is me briefly. Missy, back to you.
Yes, so
and I hope I've used simple words.
The one thing Oliver didn't say about himself, Oliver uses big words to say small things. When you want to say Oliver, you have to like have a dictionary around. He'll be like using words like obliquous, captures, fuel, and all those things. I was hearing somewhere today. So question that someone was asking earlier today. I was talking to someone. Talking to my friend. She's been really trying to do so many applications, trying to write from everywhere. So the one thing she was asking me was, you finished school today, you've done your first internship, maybe your internship is over, and you're trying to look at getting to the next level in your life. But then if you start looking around in all applications, almost every company is looking for is looking for someone from an entry level, that's the internship level. So at what point, so basically our question was, how do you know the position you're applying for is best for you? And also, how do you know that you're specializing on the right thing? Because even the internships you've done are not the same as your course. So it's like your experience from the past do not add up to your current application. Is that clear, Oliver?
I think it's clear. So HR is actually very interesting, especially from a talent acquisition point of view. So I think even before I answer the question, there is idea format.
Decline a call. Sorry.
Are you frozen?
Great. Sorry. So there's a call that was coming in there. I'm using my phone to share with you this. So what I was just trying to share with you, Nisi, and then of course the people who are watching, is that there's this concept of CV formatting, CV editing, and sometimes someone comes to you to ask, what's the best format that will guarantee them that they'll get a job. And of course, before we come to that discussion of CV editing, there is the whole bunch of what someone has been doing in campus that gears you towards the role that you'd want to do eventually. So I think the first advice would be to students who are on campus to get themselves engaged in clubs, get yourself engaged in business challenges. And today I'm glad that there are several. So we have, the Battle of the Minds by BAT. At L'Oreal, we do Brandstorm, which is a really, really good platform to give you insights into what business is about. So you get to see, from a supply chain point of view, HR, marketing, commercial, what is it that would interest you? So even before you do an internship, it gives you like a really, really good picture. So that's where it all begins. So once you are done and you get internship, you should have some clarity in terms of the direction. And this is actually one of the definitions of talent. So when we recruit, what do we look for? So we want people who are already clear on a trajectory that they want to take with their careers. And therefore, on the side of the candidate, I think it's good to really put it in your mind that, this is what I'm choosing and this is where I'm going to invest my efforts. And this is the career that I'd like to pursue. So that clarity comes in first. It dictates how you're going to format your CV. It dictates how you're going to, the kind of content you're going to read online, because after making a selection, you have to be a master of your topic. So if you're going to pursue HR, demonstrate that you know that. So those are some of the areas that candidates sort of lose out. But I think the discovery part, where you choose which course you'd want to pursue, that you should do while you're on campus through clubs, through business challenges, through conferences, through mentorship, relationship with HR people, or professionals who are already in the trade. And that gives you that clarity. So once you have the clarity, you know what to apply for. Otherwise, if you're going to apply for all roles, then your CV will always be the average. So it will be, the 70% that gets looked at, but really don't stand out at the end of the day. Nisi?
Oliver, looking at it from a point of view where you're told that the market is different from what you might think. Let's say you study finance, but then the first job that you can get, maybe you volunteer first, then the first job that you land is not really in line with your purpose. And then there's also the needs that you have, and also just want to feel like your career is progressing. Because I also find like so many young people they get in a very sunken period after finishing school, where there's no sign of employment. You feel a bit useless in the society, and you feel like there's so much that you want to do, but then just want something to keep you busy. Then let's say you get a job that is not ideally what you want to do. So does this mean you should let go of the job and wait until you get what you want, or should you just take it? And what's the value of that experience?
Sorry, I briefly lost you there. So let me try get myself
Let me
to
come up
hear your
again.
question. Okay.
So you find that when people finish school, there's a long period of thinking, a long period where you're not sure if you're gonna get employment. Should you go do your next level education? And there's no specific employer who's at that point ready for you. So you end up doing other things that could include maybe volunteering or even trying your own hustles. Then you end up having like a big space in your CV between maybe graduation to employment or having a period of the quote unquote wrong employment. So what is the value of this period? Like what do you think people can do over that period between school and employment? Do you have Oliver? Yeah, go on.
I think he has dropped for a while, probably changing devices. So I think we just wait for him.
Okay, while we
But
wait,
once he's back, we'll.
okay. So while we wait, you can ask us your questions like what's up? What would you love to ask an HR professional? Maybe from your experiences from work, what are your thoughts? And what would you like to be addressed before Oliver comes back? But while you've just broken the question I've asked you, maybe you can share with me your experiences, your individual experiences. What was that thing that you did before you got your ideal job? Assuming you have your ideal job right now. That's the first part of the question. Second part, if you don't have your ideal job, what do you think what you're doing right now? Do you think it has any value to your next expected employment? So just give me in the comments, then I'll just read them out. But meanwhile, let me give some shout outs. On Facebook, I can see Kevin Kipkoech, what's up, bro? JJ, and then on YouTube, let me see who's on this side. I can see Ovita is on YouTube. I can see Nana. There's a question here. Maybe I will ask when Oliver comes back. So I'll just hold it until he comes back. But meanwhile, let us know where you're watching from. Just drop us a chat on the Facebook or YouTube. And yeah, karibuni. Because I can see there's no any. I'm seeing a question, common mistakes for making interviews. I'm putting these questions on hold until when Oliver comes back, because I know he's trying to changing the devices because his phone kind of has an issue. So when he comes back, I'll ask all these questions. I can see 3 questions so far. Yes, but also something else I want you guys to think about. 2018 or 17, I'm not so sure when it was. There was this conversation on Twitter about toxic workplaces. I don't know if you remember, where you'd see people talking about maybe environment, your seating space, unclear contracts. My battery is running low. Give me a second to charge it. Just a second, people. I'm back.
Oliver, I can see you're back.
Yeah.
Is everything better now? Is everything okay?
Yeah. So I think I might need to shift this my device midway because the one I'm using gets constant calls, and therefore that's why the interruption. But we can go ahead as I try to get the other device to work.
Yeah, in the meantime, what you can do, I think, is if you're planning on setting up like a laptop or something, probably set it up in the meantime. Then I'll also add, you just join with the same link. I'll add you on the broadcast, and then we can proceed from there. Once I've added you on the other device, then you can
No problem. That's fine.
Okay, Nisi, you can proceed.
So I hope while Oliver is transitioning, he's still able to hear what we are saying, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So Oliver, there are questions coming in. I'll read the one from YouTube. There's one that says, what happens to those who weren't enrolled into activities like Brandstorm, among others, those who didn't have a picture of the different functions, like people who didn't join this kind of activities? What happens to them in terms of employment?
Oh, so now this is, we are speaking about people who did not engage yet are out in the market now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is my thinking. You know, the philosophy is that learning never stops. And at the end of the day, actually, one of the philosophy I meant to share today is around, you know, whatever background you're from, whatever your profession, whatever your educational background is, we are all in the business of selling. So you're either selling yourself, you're selling your skills, you're selling some commodity, some service, you're selling, you know, your work ethic or something. So every person who's looking to apply for a job, they need to consider that as the number one fact. So the person who best sells themselves gets the best visibility and therefore gets considered for interviews. So if you are selling yourself, then what is the unique value proposition that you have as a candidate for a role? So, and I'll give, you know, funny examples in this. You've seen, you know, candidates who stood by the roadside with a placard just to make sure that they are visible and have gotten jobs out of there. I think that gives us a really good picture. From that standpoint, what else would you do, not necessarily to stand with a placard on the road, that would make you more visible, more available, and more valuable when you know, recruiters like me consider talent. And I think if I were a candidate looking for a job today, number one, I would be very active on LinkedIn as a platform. Number two, I would do video CV. So on that platform, I'd just go ahead and do a really clean video of me explaining about, you know, my skills and my talent. And therefore, I think that would put you, you know, at a unique position where you stand out amongst the many candidates who are looking for jobs. So there are various skills. I think the problem is that most candidates are dormant and they basically look for a role which they may or may not have skills in, and then they send just a blanket application with one CV they've used to apply for a finance role. That same CV they're using it to apply for a marketing role, and that's the same CV. So they don't really go down to tailor their CV to that particular function. So I think that is, if I were looking for a job today, I haven't done brainstorm, I would look for the unique set of skills that I have that would sell me. Beyond that, it's more of just enrolling for courses. There is Udemy, there is LinkedIn courses. So these things will always add to your CV. So in a place where you'd have put brainstorm, you put a new certification. So if you're in marketing, you say I've done CIM. If you're in finance, you say I've done CPHA. If you're in the creative space, you can put in also some applications that you have worked on that sell you as a person.
Okay. So from that, my key takeaway points are, first of all, you're all in the business of selling. Learning never stops, and then you need to understand your unique value proposition as a person and be active on platforms that has professionals, right?
Right. Well,
Oliver? Yes. So there was another question. Let me see if I can find it. There was a question that was about how does one package these other job-related tasks on the CV? I'm not so sure how that question sounds.
Well, I'm not very sure of that question either. However, I assume this person is asking, you've seen a role, they have told you, we are looking for someone who has mastery in maybe, SAP, or they're looking for someone who knows how to do financial modeling. The thing is, you have to go back and see of the key job accountabilities mentioned in the job spec, which one do you have? So if you do have that, make sure you highlight it in your CV so that when the recruiter is perusing through, they can immediately see that, okay, this person has worked with SAP system before, and if it is maybe marketing, then you have done a bit of trade activations, you've done brand strategy, about brand P&Ls and all that. So it's more of just trying to capture the things that make you stand out. And sometimes you might need to even modify the title of your role if you see that the way it's placed in a job ad sort of is different. But when you look at the specs, it essentially says everything that you have been handling before. So then you can just modify, not too much to lie, but just to basically say that, well, what I have been doing is your role, but within our business, it is called this other function. So it's also good to highlight that.
Okay. So while you were away, you were talking about something about toxic workplaces, where toxic in terms of environment, toxic in terms of people culture. So like, what would you say about such environments, and how does one identify, and at what point is it right to leave?
Wow, that's quite an interesting question. So toxic work environment. Well, I think this could be a common thing in our country, especially. There are, of course, business spaces where what they say doesn't really reflect what you find in the place. And I think when you talk of toxic, this is a place where your work is not, your contribution is not valued. There is no meritocracy in terms of promotion. So if you have done your role, you expect that you rise through the ranks, and then you don't get that. So these spaces do exist. I think sometimes it just requires you to make a bold decision to say, okay, I know my worth more than I know my worth, and therefore where I am currently, this is not appreciated. And then you begin looking, and sometimes it's actually advisable to also be out there and just try to see within other companies what is being offered, because that also helps you to benchmark yourself, because most of the time I think graduates underquote their worth in terms of expected salaries and all that. I have a friend of mine who we were sharing stories. So today he's actually having a really good job. But initially, when he first got a job, so he worked with a bank, and his rate was slightly low. Then at some point he got an invitation to interview for another role, and then based on his benchmarking of his value, he said, okay, I'm earning this. Let me add just half what I'm earning on top of my expected salary for this other role, and therefore at least get a bump. So that is what he went ahead and did to be worthy for that other function. But it turned out that that additional bump that he thought was his true worth was actually half the salary that was being offered for that new role. And of course, there was the amusement of, you expect this much, but of course it was the company, being a good company, eventually equalized it to the appropriate level. And it was a surprise for him because, it was double his expectation. So sometimes it's good to also just go out. If you know your worth, for you to know your worth, you have to interview with other companies and just get to benchmark and know, okay, what is being offered? What is my market rate? Should I be, within a globally competitive company? And therefore that gives you a picture of the kind of opportunities you should be looking for. But I don't think you should settle. You should always look to grow.
There are two more questions that I've seen on Facebook. So Rispa is asking, what are the common mistakes people make in interviews? And then there's another question, considering the high unemployment rate in Kenya, how would you advise those who go for absolutely any job? Is it at that point that you put your value down just for making ends meet, or what's your opinion on that? I think that we answered, right?
Yeah. So I think that we answered. I really don't think going for any job is a consideration, to be honest. You should always pursue what you're passionate about and what you want to do for the long term. If you package yourself properly and if you just aggressively look for it, you'll always find it, to be honest. Yeah.
And what are the common mistakes people make in interviews? I also need this advice deeply.
Well, let me give you a scenario we had sometimes last year. So we normally do what we call an assessment center. So assessment center is structured in such a way that you have 12 or 15 candidates coming in for the session, and then you give them exercises that are supposed to gauge the different qualities, skills that they have. So then part of the introduction, of course, was to give them something funny, something that is not your typical way of introduction, and therefore they were basically, given a list of items to choose. So you are asked, if you are fruit, what would you be? If you are climate, what would you be? If you are transport system, what would you be? And we had a quite interesting scenario, because what this assessment basically tries to gauge is your communication skills and your freedom of thought, your creativity, and how do you really express yourself. So when we gave that assignment, there's a candidate who came in, and basically to him, if you are fruit, he said it'd be an apple, because an apple is basically sexy. And if you are a color, he'd be black, because the color black to him is
made
sexy.
of more. The darker the berry, the sweeter the juice.
so quite interesting. And at some point we basically began to wonder, what is the perception of this gentleman? Does he really reflect that kind of character that we'd want? And funnily enough, he was the #1 CV that we had high anticipation with to perform in that particular interview. So there's some mistakes. There's some mistakes that people make when you introduce yourself. Make sure you do properly, and that's the time you highlight your key qualities that sell you. Make sure, because we see it's a chance. If you're given a chance to introduce yourself, sell yourself like you'd want to be sold if you are a commodity or if you're something. So properly sell yourself. And the other common mistake that I see is around, the personalities of Africans. We are built to be humble, sometimes to a silence, where you can't even say, 2 lines about yourself. And therefore, you have candidates who come in for interviews, but they don't have the energy, they don't express the enthusiasm, they are not able to tell you anything. They basically respond with 1 or 2 liners. And that puts recruiters at a point where they're wondering, do you really know something, or do you really have the energy and the grit to take you through a workspace where there are always competing interests, competing priorities, and that sets a lot of candidates down. Yeah, so there's a lot I could mention around the mistakes that candidates make in an interview: coming late, not pressing properly, not sharing the relevant qualities, not having a question is actually really common, because if you're going to an interview, make sure you have some question. It shows that you have done your research, it shows that you're ready, and it shows that you're interested. So you have some curiosity to seek to address as you're there for that particular interview. I think that's an opportunity no one should ever waste.
Maybe if I can add one more mistake that we are there's a highly likelihood anyone can make it, is also, though you're saying, underselling yourself. And then there's also something about when you're asked about what you've done before, you're focused more on what you want to get than what you actually are at the moment. So you end up saying that I have done this, I will do this. You're trying to structure your answers to fit the role, while really the employer just wants to know who you are. Because also if you look around, the kind of advice that you get from career speakers or also some other LinkedIn posts, it's all that fake it till you make it. The way you sell yourself is the way they take you. So you end up selling a picture of not who you are. And you also you're trying to mirror the interviewer. In fact, that what is it called? In fact, that's what it's called. Like if it's a marketing role, you start trash talking some billboards, you get, but you don't realize that in your role at this moment, what is your perspective? So you start becoming speak for people that you are not. So I think basically you need to be yourself during an interview. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, we move on regardless. Where the next question is, how do you deal with rejection? When the answer is no.
Well, I think when the answer is no. So, I mean, you just have to get used to it. And I'll give you an example. It doesn't really, actually, this is actually another interesting topic to address. Most of the time, we Africans mostly associate, and it's a cultural issue. I don't say it's bad or good, but it has a bearing in terms of how we handle situations. So we associate our ideas, our propositions with the person we are. So we basically marry those two to the extent that if the idea is rejected, it is almost a direct attack on our person, which is not true. The idea is what has been criticized. It doesn't mean that tomorrow you do not have another fresh idea that can sell. So I think people need to demystify that. So therefore, it also means that for a role, if you are rejected, it is not an attack on your person. It doesn't mean that you are not good enough. It means for that particular function, there was someone who was best suited, or there were some skills that they were looking for that you do not exactly have, or maybe that in terms of cultural fit, or sometimes in terms of the compensation level and the motivation required, you are above that. So if you're given the function, you'll basically be disengaged. So sometimes it means you're overqualified for that particular role. So how do you deal with rejection? Basically move on. I can assure you, even me, there are interviews I have gone to and failed, yet I am a recruiter. So you'd expect that, I'd know all the things that the recruiters basically need. But yes, we also go for interviews and fail. So there's nothing to sweat about it. It just means you live to try another day.
And what do you think about the kind of interviews where after you've gone for the interview, there's no answer, no one replies to you, like you made it or you didn't make it? It kind of breaks hearts. So what do you think about such kind of HR practices?
Well, I really don't think it's a fair thing for candidates. I don't think it's a fair thing. At least if you have made an application, then you should get some response. In fact, at the point where some candidates are progressing, then you should get some information that, well, we appreciate your application. However, for this particular role, we might not have the opportunity to progress with your CV. So there is that feedback that every candidate deserves, and I think it is an ethic that all recruiters need to embrace, just to constantly keep applicants updated on the level of the application.
Okay. So there's another question coming from Cheryl. We were talking about toxic workplaces, and let's say it's actually on the screen right now. If you've left your workplace, either having resigned or let go, how does one explain to the potential employers their reason for leaving the former workplace without feeling like they're trash talking their ex-employer?
Well, I think this again goes back to the space where you're selling yourself, and separation. Sometimes it may be an honest misfit of the person and the place, and it doesn't mean that there are people who are not thriving in that particular workplace. So it could be toxic to one person, but to the other people, well, it's fish in water, they can thrive there. So for you to really say, you just need to explain that, well, for me, these were the priorities. And at the point I was leaving, I didn't feel that, my priorities aligned with the position that I was holding within that organization. And therefore, I took it as a personal decision that for me to grow, this is the kind of space that I want. And that is why I left. If you feel that maybe you don't have a candid response that can sell you, then just say it was a personal decision. You had a few other priorities to pursue, and that's why you left.
In terms of more about those toxic workplaces, so let's say you've left and definitely there's a bit of trauma inside you because you can see maybe consistent patterns of what used to be could be happening in a new workplace. So how does do you think HR should have a space where there's a mental support space for people who might be going through such kind of traumas of ex-employers?
Yeah. So I think, part of the HR training is to also be a counselor, and therefore just have some, conversations with people around what's their discomfort in the workspace. And if there is, then what kind of solutions can be put in place to help address those issues. And I think today's workplaces are a bit more responsive. We no longer have, those hierarchical and bureaucratic systems where you have to go through a channel to really get your response. So the proximity today is well improved, and I think organizations that haven't got there, of course, still needs to grow to that level where staff can share their issues and it can be addressed, as soon as they come. And there's also the point at which HR is close to the employees to also get a pulse before you even get that information that from the employee directly that, I have this issue, I am having a bit of a problem. They need to get to the point to also diagnose and just see that we might need to address a few issues here and there regarding our staff within this function. So yeah, I think constantly HR need to be responsive. Organizations need to adapt. And the interesting thing is that, the new generation of employees don't really consider work as a place to really just stay irrespective of the experience there. So mostly the current generation of employees have the flexibility to quickly choose and move on. So if the HR is not going to be that close to employees to address their issues and just to be responsive enough, then talent will leave for sure.
There's a question that just has popped up. They say don't get too attached to your job or even to your colleagues or even to your managers. Okay, it's very tempting because at times you might feel like this person has mentored me. I feel like I need to have this relationship with them. Also, like have never let go. It's something that is human. So, as HR, what do you think about that?
Well, I think this is my personal opinion, to be honest. I don't share in that thought that you should not be attached to your job. When you look at jobs generally today, you spend how much time? It's the largest chunk of your wakeful days is spent at work. So if you're going to, keep the distance and not be attached to your work, honestly, for me, from a social point of view, I think that's a lie. People still need to grow. It might not be, the intense relation that you have with your other friends whom you've grown up with over time, but there's a level of relation that you need to cultivate in your workplace to the extent that you love it and you basically enjoy being in that space. So it gives you the chance to be creative. It gives you actually the opportunity also to valorize and accelerate your project. Because remember, we said in whatever we do, we are all in the business of selling. So if you want to sell your ideas, to sell your capability, to sell your potential to grow, then you have to make them colleagues with whom you share more than just find attached kind of conversation.
But then it's more of like what's the line between your professional and your personal life at work? Because you find that people really you'll go to work, you find the people have photos of their families at their workplace. People hang out with their work friends outside work, and people might get to get too close more than they should, and there could be a bad judgment in terms of your work ethic and your personal life. So what's the boundary? What's the line that you can't cross?
I think that's it's very individual. It's very individual, and I'd not distinguish the workspace from any other environment in which we are as people, because well, it's good to know that at the end of the day you have your deliverables, and therefore you need to maintain a level of objectivity in how you make decisions and all that. That clarity should never disappear. If you're reporting to your manager, there's a couple of things that needs to be followed up. You have to keep it at that point where you can defend yourself, you can remain objective and say this is the level of my delivery, and that's, I think that's a culture that you'll find in a space, you'll find in a workspace. So it's in how you're given feedback, it's in how you do your reviews, it's in how you track your task list, and how you basically either win or lose when it comes to objectives that you're given. So that it needs to remain as is. And in, workplaces that are mature enough, you'll find that it's not something that you will tailor, you'll find it in existence. And therefore, this allows you to have, a good relationship with your colleagues that does not necessarily put you at a point where you cannot be reviewed objectively. So I would not again say that the workplace is any different. The only difference is that there are some items of delivery that you must do, but at the end of the day, it is where you spend the most of your life. And let's not pretend that you'll be a happy place if you're always putting barriers and say, well, there's this invite I've gotten, I cannot go there. There is this meetup that's happening, I cannot go there because I'm going to get close. I don't think that's the best way to go about it. Sometimes there are compromises that you might need to make to also build colleagues who are friends, and therefore it makes it easier for you to get your work done in terms of selling ideas and just getting the support you need whenever you need it. And in the workplaces, it's quite interesting, Nisi. I think you have experienced this. There are those times where you have a great urgency that might require you not to give enough time or notice to the people that support you in that particular function. And therefore, of course, you go to them and they might need to tell you that, Nisi, at the end of the day, I have some other priorities that I'm working on right now. You needed to have given me a few days notice for me to have completed that task for you. But in the space where you are friends, people always make compromises, and that happens quite a lot. So you need to also just be ready to grow, relationships that can help you thrive.
There's Ken is giving us some advice. Things are changing. The 9 to 5 routine is not working, and people are opting for other sources of income. Just gain your experience from whichever field you are through employment, but never put all your eggs in one basket. Which leads me to my next question. What do you think about side hustles?
So, well, I think it again boils down to individual decisions, because, I mean, your work contract requires you to dedicate 100% of your time to delivering within that space. However, we know that, like Njuguna said, the times are changing. Gone.
What's going on? Has he left?
No, he's still in the broadcast, but I think something has happened. So let's just wait. Ashoya, hi.
While we wait, Ashoya Sema. There's a show on mute.
Oh, I'm learning. I'm saying I'm learning. Yeah. As we wait for my next job, who knows? Who knows?
So there's this thing. I'm seeing that the topic about toxic workplaces. Nakumbuka internship, kuna place unalipwa na mandazi, unalipwa na experience, exposure. I get, like, I don't know if you guys have experienced it. Like, just it's your first job, you know, you need this experience to make your CV better. So what you need to do is to like be more obedient, learn soft skills, allow yourself to be sent to go buy breakfast for people to make them happy, and very many other funny stuff that you had to do in our internships. I don't know if you guys went through this. I see Cheryl is laughing. Trauma is real. Like, how, if you've gone through it, like, and you transitioned to another employer, like, how did you teach yourself to unlearn these patterns? Ama ukusudi to go to self-employment ama ni vipi?
So guys, he's left, so we wait. Akirejea, we'll get him back on the broadcast. But there are a few comments that are coming in from Facebook and YouTube. Faith Kangogo is saying another Friday, another premium guest. Thank you, guys. Ken Juguna is saying my first job, I was being paid 7K in a rent in 2,500. Cheryl Marcia anasema
7K. That's a lot. My first job, I was getting paid. We were
Lunch.
No, we are not even getting paid. But we did biashara huko ndani. It was some good money. Oh, welcome back, Oliver. We are just discussing our first jobs, how much we used to get paid. Ken said he used to get paid 7,000, and rent was 2,500. That's 30% of the salary already. Sisi hatukuwa tunalipwa. By the way, I hope Oliver, you pay your interns, because interns are suffering out here.
We do. we do, but we all started there when you think about it, Eddie, because I think even me, my first salary was 15,000, but after tax comes to about 13,999, and then my rent was 7,500. You know, so I had to get some other sources to supplement my needs, and trust me, we worked in this Nairobi, so I get them. I get the experience.
Yeah.
I hear you saying about
Yeah.
someone has said, yeah, you had to find other ways of making money. There's this thing about interns. Intern akiingia, they don't get trusted with the job. We understand they're learning, but then it gets to a point where no one trusts you with the job and you feel kind of useless, you know, like, and then you're told, Eti, we have to do this thing. No, this is an intern. You know, it kind of discourages someone even in their learning space. So like, how are you supposed to live with that? Should we live with it? Is it something we can change, or do we just keep this pattern of interns or just until they figure out their life?
Well, I don't know how other organizations do it, but I know for where we work, L'Oreal, I mean, interns, sometimes it's actually really hard to distinguish between an intern and a full-time employee, because the amount of responsibility is almost similar, and they get to do, you know, as important roles as any other person. So I think in a space where you're being told that, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that, maybe you also need to evaluate whether it's a space that you'd want to be, because basically you are growing to be a full-time employee, and if you're not handling some roles, then it means you're being half-baked. So it's not a good thing at all. Interns should be given a project within which to work within a particular period. They should also get visibility with senior management. So in terms of as they complete their project or midway, can they, you know, go and do a presentation within, you know, among the senior people, so that it just grows them. It also helps them to build their personalities around presenting with, you know, among the senior people. And this, I think, boils down to the humility that we're talking about, that is so African. We have been trained that, you know, people with big titles should be feared, but that should not be the case. If you're going to be considered a talent, you need to build relationships across the levels of management. So within mid-management, within senior management, just to make you visible and to also help you master your topics. Sounds good?
I'm just saying, yes, I'm just saying we're actually out of time, but I must make this comment. So guys, we're getting paid. Like, you guys really felt good in internships. Some internships, what you used to get was the morning tea at 10 a.m., which you get a half a cup and say thanks.
Yeah. There are those spaces. To be honest, I think even for me, I had to reject some. There's an internship I got with a government agency, and I was not being paid at all. So I mean, I just have to say, well, I'm too poor to come to work right now. So if you're not going to give me anything, adios. I'm not going to be able to do it. Yeah.
Especially government agencies. Like most government agencies, even my experience in a government agency, my first internship, there's no payment, there's no lunch, there's no nothing.
There's no payment.
But you don't understand computers, they need you. They're not willing to extend your contract because you're a very resourceful person, but no one is willing to put a ring on it.
You get those people who are typing like this, and
they don't even know how to turn it on and off.
Yeah. So there are those experiences.
Yeah, Oliver, I have a question here. Before we almost, like Missy said, we're almost done. It's 54 minutes. Okay. But before we leave, what do you think about this touchy issue of office husbands and office wives? What is your, from a HR perspective, not from a personal perspective, from a HR perspective, what is your view on office husbands and office wives?
That question was on my to-do list.
Well, it is actually a touchy issue, but you see, at the end of the day, HR, we are also human, so we recognize that people need to get wives and ladies need to get husbands at the end of the day. So if you have that kind of relationship and you want to take it to the next level, you only need to declare to HR, and if you're in the same department or if you're meeting with your manager, we need to separate you and put in different functions. Then, of course, there is the connotation. That one you're talking about, the informal ones. It's not properly declared, but there's something happening. I mean, it's not our business to know that's your personal life, and work-life balance means your personal life is your personal life. You're another to make choices, and that should not impact your job. At the end of the day, you'll be evaluated on the key deliverables that you have to do. So, I mean, from a HR point of view, if it is those informal ones, we don't talk about them. I mean, it's a non-issue so long as you deliver your job.
Tell us in your comments what you think. This conversation is not over. What you think about office wives and husbands?
Yeah, that's a very touchy.
Eddie.
Yeah.
Eddie, do you want to help us close? We have like 6 more minutes.
4 more minutes. So I think before we close, I'll read through the comments where Ken is saying, "Izo nigani ashoya, most of us are single. Speak for yourself, my brother." And too poor to go to work. Government and these little startups, they pay by exposure, which is so sad because the government has all the money. Now, before we close, maybe Oliver can give us that one piece of advice that changed his life before he joined work, because he's really experienced when it comes to HR matters and talent acquisition. What is it that he himself as a HR knows? This one is going to succeed in this job, this one will not. So that is that one key piece of advice that he will serve as his closing remark.
Wow. So yeah. So that's a good question. There are a couple of things. There's a word I was taught. This is the best way to summarize it, actually. So immediately I was starting my job, there was a word that used to fly around called schmoozing. Schmoozing, SCH. O double O basically M schmooze. So sorry, SCHOOZE. So schmooze. So what this talks about, it basically an art of influence. So how do you influence? I think this is one of the key things that everybody needs to do. It has a bearing on being a leader. It also has a bearing on how you make your senior team consider you as a person who can go to the next level. So knowing how to do that is actually very important. So it means selling yourself in a very subtle way and always being close to senior management in a way that they consider you like that person who they can always go to get something done. So you're basically a master executor, you are excellent at execution, but you're deliberately doing it so that you have that right visibility and that right consideration in a subtle way. Schmooze. I'll close it like that. I think it's one of the things that will help you grow.
Schmooze.
Yeah.
Give us a big vocabulary. This conversion can't go without a big word.
We had to do it. Yeah.
Schmooze kujipendekeza. What's the difference? Kujipendekeza.
No. It's not kujipendekeza. You know, kujipendekeza makes other people feel vibaya because now you're kiherehere. When you're schmoozing, you're very subtle. In fact, everybody sort of proposes you. Like you guys at your level propose you, and your senior management also propose you for roles, leadership positions, and for coordinating functions and all that. Yeah.
Schmoozing. So there you have it, guys.
Schmooze.
I don't think there's anything better we could add to that. Schmoozing it is. So whatever you do, make sure that you take all the lessons that Oliver has brought to us. Thank you, Oliver, so much for attending this session. You know, it's hard to
Thank you.
Kila mtu anogopanga
Yeah.
HR. Na HR, like you said, are also human beings. So, guys,
Yeah.
just try and make friends at the workplace. Try and get to know these guys. Thank you so much to our Nisi, who has been a charitable co-host, asking all the relevant questions. And thank you so much to each and every one of you who joined the session live, from Sherry to Keju, Adolf. There's so many. Andy Khalif, who else? Kevin Kipkoech, Nana Museti. Like, thank you so much, guys, for each and everyone. Oh, Joanne Rispa, Saki Kublokiwa, JJ, KM, Novita. Thank you so much for for being there, for attending us. I see you, Ken. Cheryl is saying she's feeling schmoozy. So the word of the day is schmooze. So go out there and schmooze. See you next week, Friday 4:30. We have a surprise guest for you. Mtampenda sana. Kama vile mmependa Oliver. If you want to know more about Oliver, his Facebook page, tutamtag hapo kwa comments. It's called Oliver Tambo. You can follow him. He's also very good at LinkedIn. Huko ndo mnafaa muende. Anakunga na tidbits of wisdom. Anangushanga from now, here and there. So see you next Saturday. See you next Friday, 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. Schmooze away. Goodbye. Toodles.
Toodles.